Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 5th, 2014 edition of Nightcast. The opening story tonight comes out of Syria as Syria misses its chemical weapons deadline.
It's almost 6 months since these pictures shocked the world. Claims that Syria used chemical weapons on its own people led to a deal to get rid of its chemical arsenal. But now the Americans suspect President Assad is stalling.
We're concerned that the Syrians are dragging their feet. They're not moving fast enough. They've missed a very important target date of the 5th of February to have all chemical weapons out of Syria.
Under the deal, UN inspectors visited Syria, catalogued its toxic armoury and destroyed its ability to produce or use chemical weapons. Danish and Norwegian ships are supposed to transport its remaining chemical stockpile out of Syria, and a specially adapted US Navy vessel will destroy them at sea. But it's the removal that's been painfully slow. The amount of chemical weapons material due to be transported out of Syria is around 1,300 tons. According to the US, as of last week, less than 5% had been removed. At that rate, they won't even finish this year. Don't dramatise the disarmament, say the Russians, who yesterday met with the Syrian opposition. Russia is one of Mr. Assad's main allies and a key player in negotiations. It says it's been told chemical weapons removal will be completed by March. Still, the UN agency overseeing the process says Syria must work faster.
Obviously, there are serious security issues that the Syrian government has to deal with, and there has been inclement weather. But these chemical weapons components must be removed and destroyed in their entirety from Syria by the 30th of June. That 30 June deadline is what we have our eyes on. We continue to believe it's possible.
Meanwhile, the destruction continues. The Syrian government's been accused of using huge barrel bombs on opposition areas. Some fear President Assad is strengthening his position on the battlefield, while international attention is focused on his chemical weapons. Rajesh Merchandani, BBC News.
And friends, you heard in that report how Russia says it's been assured by Damascus that the process will be completed by the beginning of March. Now, Russia is in the next story also, where Russia has urged to restrain the Syria regime after these barrel bombs. Now, I know we had a story on the barrel bombs out of Syria last night. The story has been updated, and although you'll see a lot of the same thing, but this is an extremely dramatic story, packed full of explosions. That these barrel bombs are packed full of explosions that killed 5 children in a mosque in a rebel-held area of Aleppo. Jim Muir has this report.
This is the weapon that's causing such devastation and concern. Activists say barrel bombs like this, rolled out of helicopters, have killed hundreds of civilians in a campaign against rebel-held parts of Aleppo that's been intensifying over the past 3 weeks. The barrels packed with explosives are a crude but deadly weapon. They're not precision-guided. The enormous explosion they cause can destroy a whole quarter, not just a specific target. This is the kind of devastation they produce. Entire buildings reduced to rubble over a large area, with survivors left desperately digging through the ruins to find others. Inevitably, most of the casualties seem to be civilians. The use of such indiscriminate weapons against residential areas is deemed to be a war crime, even if there are fighters present. The intensification of the bombing has prompted many families to flee northwards to the Turkish border or even to government-held areas. The escalation came despite, perhaps even because of, the recent peace talks in Geneva, which resume next week. The Syrian opposition, whose leader has been in Moscow for talks, is looking increasingly to Russia to restrain its ally, the Syrian regime, on the ground and to pressure President Assad to hand over power.
We are looking for an important and big role for Russia in this phase and in the next phase and during the transitional phase. We thank the Minister and the Russian government for the invitation, and we are looking for more cooperation and coordination in this phase.
The Russians were instrumental in bringing about the agreement to rid Syria of its chemical weapons. The Americans and others believe Damascus may be dragging its feet on meeting the deadline for shipping out the chemicals, but Russian officials insist the deadlines will be met, despite complications on the ground. But the Russians have been unable to diminish the violence, and plans for a local truce in Aleppo came to nothing. One crucial question hanging over the peace talks when they do resume will be how far the Russians are willing to go in pressuring Damascus and how much influence they really have. Jim Muir, BBC News, Beirut.
Friends, an entire generation of Syrian children are becoming casualties of the civil war there, with the UN Refugee Agency saying the conflict has reached a shameful milestone. According to the UN, 1.1 million young people are now refugees, and Syria faces losing an entire generation who are without parents and are being forced into child labor. Paul Wood has this report.
Welcome to the Children of Martyrs School. Most of the pupils have lost one parent or both to Syria's civil war. There are tens of thousands more like them, says the UNHCR, here in Turkey and in Jordan and Lebanon. A generation of children has been left traumatized by the war. Some watched a mother or father killed. Here they draw what they witnessed, returning to the same horrific images again and again. Musa remembers losing his father. The family woke to hear a plane. My dad told me to hide in the toilet, he says. He went out to rescue someone. A missile landed and killed him. Though she's just 10, Fatma is too afraid to show her face. Her father was killed, she explains, and she goes on. Bashar Assad might kill the rest of my family too. Twins Uday and Luai describe how their family fled in the back of a truck when their village was shelled. The truck was ambushed. My mum was hit here, here, and here, he says. He explains how she died in front of them. Refugees are disadvantaged right from the start. 1-year-old Mohammed does not have a birth certificate. It would cost $100 and take months, says his father. Many births aren't registered because parents fled without documents. The children are stateless. It could make return home impossible. To be a child refugee is often to assume a crushing burden of responsibility. Many have to work to support their families. It can be backbreaking, long hours for little pay, just a few dollars a day. They have no choice. The child may be the family's only breadwinner. UNHCR officials talk about a lost generation of Syrian children. They call the 1.1 million child refugees a shameful milestone of the conflict. It is, though, a crisis with no end in sight. In Lebanon, around 1 in 4 of the population is a refugee. Yet every day, more cross the border. Half of them, children. Paul Wood, BBC News, Beirut.
Friends, our next story also involves children, and it also relates to the first seal of the 6 seals of Revelation 6, in that the first seal is depicted as a white horse that Jesus Christ described as religious deception. And in this story, the Vatican must immediately remove child abusers. The UN has said that the Vatican should immediately remove all clergy who are known or suspected child abusers. The UN watchdog for children's rights denounced the Holy See for adopting policies which allowed priests to sexually abuse thousands of children. The head notes on this says, friends. In a report, it also criticized Vatican attitudes towards homosexuality, contraception, and abortion. Now, I would think the Vatican would be, I think they're opposed to abortion, so there's some interesting things the way this is going, godly and ungodly on both sides here in a way. The Vatican responded by saying it would examine the report, but also accused the authors of interference. Now, of course, that would be a natural response from the Vatican because the Roman Catholic congregation is used to telling governments what to do, not the other way around, having government tell it what to do. I mean, for hundreds of years, friends, the Pope coronated the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, except for, which one was it? Napoleon. He grabbed the crown out of the Pope's hands and he crowned himself. He was impatient, didn't want to wait, and didn't want any instruction or advice or whatever from the Pope. But you all know the fate of Napoleon, his Waterloo. But Gavin Hewitt has this report.
In St. Peter's Square today, Pope Francis greeted thousands in the February rain. His informality, his smile, his identifying with the poor has drawn the crowds. He spoke of children and communion, but even as he was talking, the UN delivered a devastating report, accusing the Church of covering up decades of abuse by priests, affecting tens of thousands of children. The UN essentially accused the Church of putting its own interests above those of children.
The Holy See has consistently placed the preservation of the reputation of the Church and the protection of the perpetrators above children's best interests.
Pope Francis has crafted a reputation as a reformer, but the UN was unsparing. It told the Church to remove all known or suspected child abusers, to bring in outside law enforcement, to hand over their archives on sexual abuse cases. By the end of the day, the Church was still fashioning its response. The Vatican was clearly stung by this report. One official accused the UN body of distorting the facts by failing to take into account fresh attempts to rid the Church of child abusers. But the Vatican did promise to thoroughly examine the UN recommendations. The Church also saw in the report a broader attack on some of its teachings, but some victims of abuse supported the UN.
I am absolutely still very concerned about the safety of children around the world at the hands of Catholic clergy. We know that a lot of information is held about them both at the Vatican and in dioceses around the world, and the Church must hand that information over to the authorities.
Almost a year ago, the Church was choosing a new pope. He spoke of shame and appointed a commission to investigate sex crimes. But many say the crisis is not over.
Well, if it's true, then it makes me sort of sick to the depths of my heart, really. The Church has got to show itself to be unafraid to act positively. It's no good. We've gone long beyond the stage where we can just wring our hands and say, isn't this terrible?
In less than a year, Pope Francis has reinvigorated the Church, but a UN body today laid down a challenge. When it comes to abuse by priests, can the Church be trusted to investigate itself? Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Rome.
Friends, Michael Hurst has produced another one of his popular 60-second outlines for the BBC News, in which he looks into the background, the BBC News looks into the background of the Roman Catholic Church child abuse in 60 seconds.
Another matter was the code of silence that was imposed by the Church on children, and the fact that reporting to national law enforcement authorities has never been made compulsory.
Okay, another very well done video by Michael Hurst. And friends, let's go now to Spain, where actually it's off the French coast, where a Spanish cargo ship split in two. 12 people have been rescued from an empty cargo ship after it split in half on a breakwater off the southwestern coast of France.
A dramatic rescue unfolds above stormy seas off the French coast. This lifeguard is winched from the wreckage of the Luno cargo ship after freeing the 12 crew members trapped on board. The 100-metre-long vessel slammed into the breakwater at Anglet after its engines failed. It snapped in two, with the boat becoming trapped on rocks as the stern drifted towards the shore. One eyewitness said he was shocked when he spotted the empty cargo boat drifting so close to the sea wall.
Considering the state of the sea, I thought, that's brave. 5 minutes later, I got a phone call saying the ship was being pushed onto the rocks. So I came straight here, and when I arrived, the vessel was anchored facing the sea wall. It was being turned by the sea, and then the waves forced it onto the rocks, where it broke up very quickly.
Emergency services arrived at the scene to treat crew members, but none of them were seriously hurt. The Spanish ship, which typically carries fertilizer, had been heading to a nearby port to load up with cargo. A small amount of fuel has begun to leak into the ocean, prompting the French authorities to raise a pollution alert. Claire Brennan, BBC News.
And friends, we showed you video last night. Excuse me, I'm kind of losing my voice with this cold weather, giving me a little bit of a sore throat tonight. Actually, and I should tell you something I did. I took some really delightful Tennessee, very hot chow chow tonight. It's some of you may know what this is. It's a special mix of tomatoes, onions, cabbage, bell peppers, and very hot red peppers. And it's probably very good for me, but it set my mouth and my throat ablaze, having just eaten a bash of that with some sweet potatoes and honey just before broadcast time tonight. But let me see if I can get us into this next story, another story related to France. A French court has begun. Now, we played some video, as I said, on this last night, but this has been updated with a little something new in it for tonight. And we do want to ride herd on this, because you'll see in this video again the skulls of not just 1,000 or a few thousand, but hundreds of thousands of one particular tribe of people that had been killed in what is believed to have been a genocide effort. A French court has begun hearing the landmark trial of a former Rwandan intelligence chief who is charged with complicitly charged in the 1994 genocide. Pascal Simbukangwa who is a paraplegic after a car crash, was arrested in 2008 while living under an alias on France's Indian Ocean island, which you'll hear about in this report. I'm kind of repeating what she's saying with a sore throat. I should just let the reporter have at this one. Emily Buchanan, pull us out of this one, will you please?
The following report contains some disturbing images.
It was an orgy of killing, which 2 decades later haunts Rwanda. 100 days of slaughter left at least 800,000 dead. Bitter ethnic violence in which the majority Hutus turned on the minority Tutsis, the aim to wipe them out. Many of the leading perpetrators have faced justice, but this man, found in hiding on a French island in the Indian Ocean, had escaped trial until now. Pascal Simbikangwa, a paraplegic after a car accident in 1986, is accused of complicity in genocide and supplying arms to the Hutu militia. He denies the charges. For victims, the court case is an important step in coming to terms with the past horrors.
As people came out, the militia slaughtered them. They slaughtered them. They slaughtered them. I went through this too, and I was wounded and fell into a coma. When I woke up, I couldn't get back on my feet because there were dead bodies on top of me.
Dafrosa Gautier lost more than 80 members of her family. She and her lawyer husband have spent 12 years building a case against Mr. Simbikangwa.
It's a big moment in history, a big moment for the victims and their relatives who've been waiting for this trial in France for a long while, and for the French themselves who were certainly misinformed at the time.
France has long been criticised for its close ties with the former Hutu government and protecting some of the killers who fled Rwanda, along with millions of refugees after the genocide.
Of course, the message of this trial is also that France will no longer be a safe haven for Rwandan suspects of genocide, hopefully, after all these years.
There are thought to be dozens of alleged perpetrators in hiding on French territory. Campaigners say many more trials are needed if the ghosts of this nightmare are to be laid to rest. Emily Buchanan, BBC News.
Friends, our next story that relates to Israel and the West Bank and the SodaStream chief executive Daniel Birnbaum, who gave an interview to one of the programs with the BBC News that's hard talk, that's sometimes pretty hard with people. And the hard talk host was a little bit hard on Daniel Birnbaum tonight in interviewing him regarding Scarlet Johansson, who he says was not motivated by money when she stepped down from her role at Oxfam. The actress was criticized for being a brand ambassador for the Israeli company, which has a factory in a Jewish settlement in the West Bank. The charity said it was incompatible with being an Oxfam Global ambassador. And you'll hear the Hard Talk host give Mr. Birnbaum a hard time at a few moments during this interview. And I'll discuss it more when we come out of it.
It's not about money, and we don't disclose the commercial terms that we have with Scarlet. I can tell you that her decision has not been financially motivated, but rather humanitarian driven, because she truly cares about people and about bringing peace to the region in the Middle East and doing so within a two-state solution.
How do you feel about being part of the occupation of territories seized from another country?
Well, what I'm doing at SodaStream in the factory of Mishar Dumim is occupying Palestinians side by side with Israelis. It's not a settlement, it's a factory. In fact, we are part of the Palestinian economy and possibly part of the future, the seeds of the future Palestinian state. We are not financing the settlement economy. We are giving equal rights, equal wages, equal benefits, and equal opportunity to Palestinians.
But we're
proud about what we're doing in this factory.
But you have taken a political position in choosing to operate this factory inside the occupied territories. You accept that at least?
No, I inherited this factory. It's been there for 17 years, and it's operating under the agreement of the Palestinians themselves. And this is an inconvenient truth that many people forget. According to the Oslo Accord of 1993, the Palestinians themselves agreed that Area C, and this factory is located in Area C of the West Bank, will be operated under the Israeli administration until the final borders will be drawn. And
now, friends, I want to pause it right there for just a moment because Mr. Birnbaum, I believe, is handling himself very well here. The moderator or the host of the Hard Talk program is going to continue on to hit at him against the occupied territory. You know, if the whole world took that position, if you took land away from somebody else because you won the war, and in the case of the war over there in the Middle East, the war that was started there was started by the Palestinians against the Israelis. Now in America, when Englishmen came over to North America and took over parts of the Northeast and then spread further, is the world looking at it like, hey, you people in the United States, you took the occupied territory, you are occupying the land of the Indians, you know, and should we be expected to give it back? Oh goodness, don't put any ideas that might get up through NSA to the president on that. But let's let Mr. Birnbaum finish and the host as well here.
that is how we are operating, and that's a good thing for the Palestinians who work for me because we're paying them Israeli wages, which is about 4 times more than what they would earn in the Palestinian Authority if they were lucky enough to even have a job, because the unemployment there is between 30 and 40%.
Well, you've just accepted the Oxfam position that you are operating an enterprise within the occupied territories.
You know, I'm going to let Mr. Birnbaum respond to that, but friends, I just want those of you that are listening to be aware of the way the whole world, including Brother Ephraim in England now, and of course Brother Manasseh and the government here in the United States is doing the same thing sometimes against Israel, against Brother Judah. You know, but again, the United States is occupying the land that belonged to the Indians at one time, and maybe other countries are doing a lot of the same thing. But when it comes to Israel, let's jump down their throats as much as we can. Mr. Birnbaum, your turn to answer on that.
Of course we're operating an enterprise within the occupied territories, but my dilemma is, should I throw 1,300 people into unemployment and poverty? We are feeding 5,000 Palestinians in this factory. We employ 500. Each one feeds 10. So 5,000 people have health insurance and food on their table because of us. And it's completely cynical and ironic that Oxfam, a human rights organization whom I used to admire tremendously, by the way, are the ones who are telling me to throw these people into poverty, into unemployment. I can't understand how throwing 1,300 people into unemployment will promote peace.
Good response. Friends, we're out of time for tonight. Thanks for joining us for this Wednesday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, the creek don't rise. We'll be back again Thursday night. Until then, your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying, so long, friend.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.